bet
that looks awful.
I bet there's a bolt underneath that's loose.
Yeah. Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Doing fine, Cecil. I don't know.
No, there's not
That
one.
could see.
That's why. The
Well,
bolt is gone.
you have a tiny,
Tuck it away in the corner and don't even use it.
It's a
Use
tiny
the stool
stool.
instead.
Let me see if we can find
That's a
another.
me-size collector.
It'll be all right.
How was the birthday?
Great.
Good.
Yes, thank you for asking. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hey. Hey, Oliver.
They are out in the hall. I better go grab
I'll
them.
go
now
get
you mentioned it.
I'll go get them if you want.
Okay. All right, Sam.
We got all kinds of room back there. Aubrey likes that back row.
Is your wife not here?
She's here.
She gonna sit there?
She's teaching class.
Oh, okay.
She's teaching your class, first grade.
Oh,
First, she's got first and second.
I'm going to third and fourth.
Oh, cool. When
In
you-
June.
June. Come here, Donna.
So see you.
It is an honor to see you.
We're all like helping each other out.
You're better than she was.
We've never had any
But she's still not good.
just like we didn't teaching
I don't know what level of well we're talking about, but she's a lot better.
I'm glad you. I'm glad you.
Hey, Scott.
The Dallas is yes.
I'm going to see you.
This new job.
Don's teaching.
You caught me saying
So
that.
I did, so that's true. I was like shooting my shot. I was just a long shot. So there's no way. Is there one example?
I'm sorry. I literally don't hear all that.
I'm
I'm going to be
Thank you.
assistant.
You got one? You got one? We got
Get your names. Great to see you.
Thank you so much. You start tomorrow. No, I start at the I still have to finish because they have to wait until we finish training for my position. So it's that's why it was. I just finished.
I'm good.
I found out
I'm
that
good. I'm in great shape. I'm getting better every day.
Hear it. Write a book.
How's your time?
You're welcome to. Your choice. Your choice.
Can't find anything to do? No, you're bored.
Like literally like my.
Hello, sir.
I bet you don't miss the airport. I haven't flown over 2 years. Different, huh?
I know.
That's so fun.
Dandy, it's great to see you.
You too, man. You're not teaching today?
Yeah, we're all tight.
Okay, cool.
How you doing?
I try not to be.
But especially after this.
Anybody knows where there is another one of these, let us know. You know, that thing is in bad shape.
Just need a bolt in the bottom of it. There's no bolt holding this into the base. It's just not there. Well, I'll try not to get too demonstrative and like that. That's probably on my list of
I was
things to
gonna
do.
say,
isn't it?
if you know a deacon, get him to take care of it.
That is on my list now. Put that right after I change the carpet color.
Yeah. I like purple.
You like purple?
Yeah.
Does anybody else need a book? You want to hold this one? Any others? I got 3 more. One of them that is a entirely different color than the others. I don't know what that means. Maybe it means it has the answers. I guess we are about ready. It's good to see everybody in here this morning. We'll start with a word of prayer. Keith, you're sitting right in front of me. Do you mind leading some prayer?
dear Father in heaven, thank you for this day that you provided, Lord. Thank you for the opportunity to come and worship you, and help us to carefully study the lessons and the scriptures provided, Lord, and to make application in our lives. Help us to make thoughtful comments, and all of us gain greater knowledge and be able to put that into practice. Thank you most of all for your Son who's died on the cross so we can have forgiveness for our sins. Help us to always have the appropriate appreciation for that. Thank you for your church and all the blessings that come as part of being a Christian. Be with us and guide us. Be with Logan as he teaches this morning. Help him to have remembrance of the things he prepared. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Come in. You guys have books, you need one. All right. So in this class, I'm going to be teaching with Doug. So we've been talking about this a little bit. We're looking forward to it. He'll probably give a little bit more insight, but my understanding is these lessons are each written by a different gospel preacher. So lots of different, avenues to look at Christ. I like to ask a lot of questions. I encourage you to ask a lot of questions. Ask the really hard, difficult, impossible questions when Doug's teaching. And then we'll let him handle those. To start off, I want to do just a little simple exercise to get us thinking along the lines of some of the things we're going to talk about. Extremely open question. What is something that you remember very distinctly learning as you were growing up? It can be a hard lesson. It can be something fun. What is something that you remember learning? Super open question. I got a couple to tell them myself, but I want to hear from you guys.
I remember I think I was either 5th and 6th or junior high, I had to memorize Isaiah 53.
Isaiah 53.
And I remember that being a difficult task at that time.
All right. If I run out of material this morning, I'll just get you to recite that.
Yeah, good luck. That's been a few years.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I remember during a gospel meeting, the preacher, I believe it was Cleo Blue, who had us all, the kids come down front, for the gospel meeting before it started. And we memorized 1 Corinthians 13.
1 Corinthians 13. All right. You guys are very biblical thinking this morning. I like that.
I remember how to tie my shoe.
There you go. I like that one. What else?
Learning to drive.
Driving.
Riding a bike without landing into a bush.
That's a good story. I've heard that one a few times. What about difficult lessons? What about I don't know, the old proverbial learning the hard way? Anybody want to tell on themselves?
Teaching Scott how to drive was really difficult.
He says he had it perfect. Anyway.
I got an A in driver's ed.
There you go. Teaching Stephanie to drive a stick shift.
Oh, that was awful.
Yes, it was.
I completely forgot about that.
So the way that went is right before we got married, her parents offered us their Volkswagen Passat as the car we would have. She had this old Maxima. I said, of course, absolutely, thank you. I'm going to grad school. At best, we're making $15 an hour then, so yeah, we will take it. She said, nope, I don't want it. I said, why not? She said, it's a stick shift. I said, we'll teach you. So her dad tried, and they got into a big fight, and that stuff. Yeah, he did. The reason I remember that is because then I tried it. We got into another big fight.
I just remember being on MTSU campus and just praying that the light would not turn red, so I wouldn't have to stop and start again. Because that was like
Eventually, she
awful.
convinced her dad just to leave the car at her house, and she had the basics down, and she taught herself driving around the neighborhood, and she got it, and we drove that car until it died. So, great job, man. Any other tough lessons? I remember one specifically that I learned about lying. I was probably about Summer's age, probably 8 or 9. And we had some good friends that we went to church with. They had 4 boys. For some reason, both of my parents had to work that Sunday. That was rare, but they both had to. So they dropped us off at our friend's house. And my dad handed me a $1 bill. And he said, this is for the collection. Yes, sir. Got it. And so, so I had that, went to church, and went through the whole service. Legitimately just forgot it was in my pocket. I mean, I really did. It wasn't an intentional not putting it in the tray. I just forgot. And then church was over. We went back to a friend's house. At that point, if I had just said, Dad, I forgot, I'm sorry, wouldn't have been a big deal whatsoever. But my friends just happened to be selling the world's best chocolate. You know, almond covered chocolate covered almond, you know, so good. And so I had to have $1. So I bought one, and my dad came to pick me up, and I'm eating it on the way home. I don't know what I was thinking. He said, well, that looks good. I said, oh, it is. He said, where'd you get it? And like it just clicked in my head, uh-oh, what am I going to do right here? I got a choice to make. I bought it. Oh, yeah? Yeah, with what? $1 I had. Where'd you get the $1? Oh, it was one of mine. Whoops. Yeah, it got real bad at that point. He knew I was lying. I mean, just completely knew it. A few more questions, I finally convinced. He took that truck, turned it around, went back to our friend's house. I had to go in and apologize to the person I bought it from, one of my friends, his parents, and let's just say I didn't sit well for the rest of the day. I learned that lesson very clearly. Now, these lessons here, Keith, how did you learn Isaiah 53?
Bible class, just working on it over and over. I remember it was Wes Smith. If anybody remembers Wes Smith, that was a Wes Smith thing.
Okay. 1 Corinthians 13.
You just,
Repetition.
that's back when I could remember things. And you just went home and memorized it.
Okay. How do we learn to tie our shoes?
You just keep doing it until you get it,
Okay.
until it doesn't unravel.
Somebody has to show you how to do it.
Kindergarten.
I learned recently there's more than one way to tie shoes. I only thought there was one, but I saw somebody else do it. I'm like, well, that's not really well, that worked. Okay. Driving. How'd you learn to drive the stick shift in college?
Made everybody leave me alone, and I figured it out on my own.
So like I said, she learned the basics, you know, the whole clutch and gas, and I learned to drive on this little pickup truck that was a stick shift and wouldn't idle. So you had to have 3 feet to drive it. That was interesting. I wrecked it. Same thing with bike. What about that lesson that I learned on lying? I learned my lesson through
Consequences. You learn the consequences.
Embarrassment, a little bit of pain that reminded me of it. That's been a very big thing for me with my children. I want to always know that what they're telling me is the truth, because there's going to come times when I've got to decide who to believe.
A common theme with all of them is that you messed up.
Yep.
I mean, every single one of those, but you didn't do it right the first time.
Learn the hard way.
Fail fast and fail forward.
Yep. Another lesson in my growing up, I'll try not to throw my brother under the bus too much here, but let's just say he was the difficult one in many ways. And I remember riding in the car with my dad one time, and he was so frustrated with him. He was just so frustrated with my brother. He just turned to me, and I was 16 at the time, and I know that because he was 18. And he said, you know, if he would just do what he was supposed to do, he would get so much more freedom, right? We wouldn't have the curfews we have. We wouldn't have all these rules. You would have so much more freedom. And that stuck with me. And by no means was I perfect. But boy, I had a whole lot more freedoms than he did because I learned from his mistakes, right? I had the example of what not to do. Sometimes that can be extremely valuable. Come on here. Sometimes that can be extremely valuable, is not just examples of what's perfect, but examples of things that don't go right. You know, in those situations, I saw how not communicating with my parents properly got in the way of my brother being able to do the things he wanted to do and go where he wanted to go and all those sort of things. So for our lesson today, we're going to talk about Jesus and the example that he provides for us. Some of it is the specific, tangible, do as he does. but some of it is not as much, and we'll talk about that. Sometimes as we learn lessons, you learn lessons that you didn't expect to learn. Sometimes the lesson isn't as a parent. I'll tell myself one more time. Senior year of high school, night before the first football game, starting wide receiver and kicker, I'm all excited. One of the things you do is you go and you paint a bunch of signs and you put those out on the football field, and all innocent fun until somebody shows up with 3 dozen eggs. And then you take those to the juniors and you throw them at the innocent fun, right? And so I just happened to have my dad's pickup truck. They all piled in. I drive over and we're throwing eggs. Just so happens I pulled up next to the county constable's house, who came out of the house and didn't like what we were doing. And then one of the knuckleheads in the back of my truck threw an egg at his wife. Yeah, that was a bad situation. I did not leave. I stayed. He took my license and told me to leave and go home. And then I got a decision to make on the way home. Do I tell my dad what happened? Or, well, first I go wash the truck. I'll just say that, get all the eggs out of it. I walk in and they're just sitting there looking at me. I'm like, they know. And so I told them what happened, and they scolded me just like I deserved. And then my mom got up so upset, went to the bedroom. My dad walked up and he says, next time, don't drive. Did he just tell me I could throw eggs again? I don't think that's exactly what he was saying, but his point is that by driving, I was the one responsible for everybody else. Again, a lesson that I wasn't expecting to learn at that point, but he found a chance to teach it to me. Okay. So I got that. So sometimes the lessons aren't as apparent. Sometimes they come at you a little bit of a surprise. Turn over to 1 Peter 2. 1 Peter 2. Neil just texted me, said he can't read the board. Neil, neither can the people that are sitting in here because I've got very messy handwriting, so sorry about that. All right, 1 Peter 2. Somebody read verse 21 and 22, please.
For to this you were called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his steps, who committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth.
Okay, so what part of that is our example? It says, for this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving an example, so that you might follow in his steps. What is the example there in verse 21 that he's leaving for us?
Well, it says in 22, he committed no sin and no deceit was found in his mouth.
Okay, so you're advocating that verse 22 is more the example that he left for us versus 21. Is that right?
I think that's getting the example by reading. He suffered, and Peter's saying we're going to suffer as well, just like Ryan talked about this morning.
Yeah.
There's suffering involved by being called.
Yeah. What a great lesson, right? You're going to be miserable, come forward and stand and sing. I don't remember that one. Yeah, so it is the example that we have to die on a cross. I hope not. Why not? Why is that not something that we do?
There's no point for us to do it.
Okay, there's no point. Why is there no point?
Christ did it for us.
Christ did it for us, so we don't have to. Right? Christ did it for us so that we don't have to. Besides that, I'm not Christ, and neither are you. And so I can die on a cross. Doesn't save you guys, right? Because of who I am and who I am not. All right, the author here in the first paragraph says that the word here, for example, comes from the Greek for elementary education. It describes the way Greek boys learn to write. The exercise tablet, usually a shallow box filled with soft wax. Then he goes on to talk about how the master would write something out, and then they would copy it. I immediately thought about that wide ruled paper in kindergarten, when you write the A over and over and over and over. And by the bottom of the third line, it looks nothing like the top left of the first line. You guys know what I'm talking about there. But it gives you an opportunity to see the example, to see what it's supposed to look like, and do your best to copy that, to emulate that, to make the same thing on your paper. he also goes on to talk about the example that Jesus leaves us and how it is a perfect example. Somebody turn over to Isaiah 53 and read that. 53:9. I should just let Keith recite it. He's got it.
It might be really difficult.
You didn't know that was going to backfire, did you?
Yeah, well, I kind of expected it.
Yeah. Isaiah 53:9. Anybody?
They made his grave with the wicked, but with the rich at his death, because he had no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth.
Okay. Author says, well, Peter refers especially to Jesus' perfect example of patience and suffering. Isaiah spoke prophetically of the Lord's absolute freedom from sin. As other writers in the history of Jesus' life show, no other human ever lived without sin. And we heard a little bit about that this morning, about how how difficult situations around you create frustration or tension, or causes you to be in a bad mood. Here we are with the example of Jesus suffering the most horrendous death I can think of, forgiving people in the process. And it wasn't just that he carried out action, because there's times when I can bite my tongue. Rarely. I know it usually just comes out. Sorry, Beth. But sometimes I can hold it in. And, if somebody cut me off in traffic and she expects me to say something, but maybe I didn't one time. That doesn't mean I didn't want to. That doesn't mean it wasn't in my thoughts. It doesn't mean that I'm still not held responsible for what's going through my head. But here in Jesus, those thoughts didn't even go through his head. I think that's one of the things that's extremely impressive, something that we can't even hardly imagine what that's like. He goes on to say, even the most righteous men are examples to others only as they follow Jesus. Jesus lived above sin because he had perfect self-control and because he had perfect consciousness of God, being fully committed to him in all things. Other than Jesus, who in the Bible do we have that are just great examples of how we should carry ourselves in different aspects of life? Who comes to your mind? Job. What about Job? Okay. What all did Job go through? Everything, right? Lost all of his livestock, all of his riches, his kids, and all he had left was his friends and his wife, who basically blamed him and told him to curse God and die. His friends were great until they opened their mouth, right? They were there, then they said too much. Okay, so patience, gracefulness in suffering, great lessons there. Was Job perfect? No, we can continue to read and see how he messed up. Who else did we learn things from? Joseph. What did we learn from Joseph?
I don't know what to say.
I was going
to stayed strong when it was hard to stay strong, I would say.
I was going to say not so much how to relate to your older brother. That. He probably could have handled that a little bit better. Hey, you guys are going to bow down to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I got you sold, buddy.
So with Joseph, I think the story with him is just so neat, and we can definitely relate to it today. When the Lord tugs on your heart, and you know that he has you in a certain role or job or whatever for a reason, and you know he's going to play it out, he plays it out in his timing. So he was given that vision of, I'm going to be this great leader one day. Well, he shared it with his brothers. Well, they turned against him because they were jealous and they were mad. Well, after that, he gets thrown into slavery, and just because of their retaliation and jealousy. And he's probably thinking, what happened? Wait a second, I thought I was going to be doing X, Y, Z, but you have me almost like demoted. You have me sold off in this place. I don't even know what's going on. But he even though he may not even have questioned, but he probably thought those thoughts of, okay, God, what do you have for me?
What?
You know, what's going on? But then he stayed the course.
Yeah.
And he stayed faithful. And even though it did not happen in his timing, it still happened. And he even came out stronger in the end because they didn't even recognize him in the end. And so, like, almost like your character, like when somebody goes away for basic training for the army or whatever, they come back a completely different, polished person to where you don't even recognize their character because they're so completely different. I think that's what the Lord did with Joshua too. They just, I mean,
Joseph.
Joseph, yeah.
Well, and how many times did that have to happen, right? So he sold. Well, that's bad. Well, he works his way up and then the whole Potiphar's wife situation. Well, that's bad. Well, then he thinks he's about to get out of jail because he helps these other people and they forget about him.
So he kept taking jabs on down the line, but he stayed faithful, and in the end, the Lord brought him to where he really wanted him to be after he conditioned them for a little while, I guess you could say.
What about some New Testament examples of some characteristics or some very specific things that we are supposed to follow as an example?
Barnabas is a great example in the Bible. He was positive. He brought out the best in people, and he was one who did not have to be in charge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good example. Who else?
Oh, Stephen.
Okay.
He did like Christ and forgave those people that were stoning him.
Yeah, in the moment.
And he took advantage of the opportunity to speak when he was, right before all that, which is quite impressive.
Yeah.
To feel things like that.
Yes, ma'am.
Mary and Martha.
Okay. Tell me what you're thinking about Mary. I like that.
I just like the fact that Mary chose the right thing. Jesus said Mary chose the better thing.
Yeah.
Because I tend to sometimes be more of a Martha. But Mary did what was right.
Yeah, and it's the importance of the priority at the time, right? It's a silly correlation, but at work, right? Those who work our front desk, there's more work to be done than can be done on most days. There just is. I see some nods around because you guys know how that work goes. So you have to prioritize, right? What's the most important thing now? Well, in my clinics, which is physical therapy, it's probably the patient standing right in front of you versus the phone that's ringing. You have to come back to that. So you got to prioritize. That situation, Jesus was there. Jesus was speaking. He is the one that you need to focus on. Martha was doing good stuff, right? She was doing very good things, just like people at work might be doing, good things, but that's not the priority at that moment. Any others? Any other really good examples that we should follow up? And what I do like is that so much of what we're talking about right now is characteristics. Is characteristics that these leaders in the Bible showed that we can learn so much from and do. And I think that's a lot of the example that this author gives is it's not just the act that was happening, tying your shoes, okay, you put a year and then around the tree and then pull it through. My parents didn't use that one, but that's somebody else taught me that one. But it's more so the attitude that is displayed during your life, during challenges, during good and bad times. Any other examples that come to mind?
Peter had a ton of examples.
Sure.
And while the 3 denials are powerful, to me the most powerful is being scared and embarrassed of the Gentiles, scared of the Jews. I'll eat with them as long as my friends aren't here, the Gentiles. But when the Jews come, I'm going to move over here and act like I don't see you. And Paul calls him out. And I think, it's the same thing as sitting in your boss's office and he has a gripe. And your first thought is, kind of Ryan mentioned this too this morning, well, it was because of this, and well, that person. And really, what you need to do is just sit there and go, and I know how Peter felt. Yeah, you're right. I messed up.
Yeah.
And that's the first step to learning from it. And, you know, you can shut that situation down by just accepting. You know, I mean, those are the most powerful words at work. You know what? You're right. Because it just shuts everything down. But Peter taught us that lesson by Paul writing that in Scripture.
You know, I've really been working to teach a similar lesson to one of my children who will remain nameless, Summer. In that your reaction to things is under your control, right? I guess technically this morning it wasn't Summer, it was Cooper. I hear him just yell at her. I mean, just from the living room yell. I come out there, what in the world is going on? Well, she did this. Did she do that? Sure she did. Was it really annoying? Yes. Is screaming and yelling at your sister right there the right reaction? No, probably not. We'll handle this, but you're in control of your actions. Tough lesson, right? Tough lesson that thankfully we got a lot of good examples of people who did it well, especially Christ, right? Talk about controlling your own response. Author in this next paragraph goes on to say, the figure changes in the second clause where it says that you should follow his steps. To that of a guide, Jesus leads by his footprints. He is a perfect example in all that he did and for all that we must do in service to God. He is perfect because in him there is no sin, 1 John 3:5. And he is our example because he commands us to follow him. Okay, so somebody pick up there and read this next paragraph, right where it says, number 2, Jesus is our example of right conduct.
Walking in his steps does not mean that we do so perfectly. We achieve perfection only by the grace and mercy of God through submission to his will. Nor does it mean that we imitate Jesus in the things he did by virtue of his divine nature, as in receiving the homage of men. Moreover, following him does not require us to do all he did in the service of God. He lived as Jew under the law of Moses, but we are free from the law. Therefore, we cannot follow him in observing the precepts of Moses. Indeed, I, Paul, say to you that if you become circumcised, Christ will profit you nothing. And you who attempt to be justified by law, you have fallen from grace. How then do we follow the example of Jesus?
Okay. Simple example that came to my mind in the first part of that where he talks about it's not just walking in the footsteps, was walking in the footsteps. And the reason that came to mind is because I used to go hunting with my dad. We almost never got anything. We weren't very good. But we would go out, and I knew that the idea at first was to stay quiet. Don't say much. Well, then you're walking out in the woods, and there's leaves everywhere. Maybe there's holes. Maybe there's other things. And I would literally stand right behind him, and if he took a step, I would land my feet in his spot. Because I knew that if it made a noise, then it was his fault because I followed him. Right? That's really how I thought about that. But if I'm way over here and stepping on sticks and doing things, he's going to be very frustrated with me because I'm not following him, right? And so it was partially because I thought he was probably going the right way and he knew which way to go around the woods and who knows, north from south. But it was more so I stayed out of trouble. Okay. Well, when we look at Jesus, we've already given a bunch of examples of some of the things that he did, how he carried himself, that are good examples for us. But specifically, the author goes on to give us 2 different things. And so the A here says, we imitate his manner of life. It says, this is seen in the specific example that Peter gives. We did not suffer on the cross, which is what I brought up earlier, and we cannot die for the sins of others. Just don't have that ability. But following his manner of suffering unjustly for doing right, we catch his spirit and return love for hate. So here's a quick little project. I want you to take 5 minutes. I want you to find a specific example. So looking it up of Jesus and how you can or have done the same in how he responded. Okay. So it might be on the cross, it might be a whole other aspect of his life, but find an example of something he did. Take 3 minutes. Look it up and then share it with us, what he did and then how we have done the same or should do the same. Take just a minute.
Do we have any more books or anybody that doesn't?
I've got 2 more. There you go.
You need this one, I ain't gonna.
No, I still got 1 extra. All right. So an example that Jesus gave us about how he responded or carried himself or taught. And I want to hear how you have done it. I'm a very practical thinker. How does this help us in our lives? Take 1 more minute and we'll start sharing. Anybody got one?
I said Jesus was baptized. He wasn't baptized for the remission of sins as we are, but it was to fulfill all righteousness, but we are baptized for the remission of sins. So he was baptized and I'm baptized too.
That's a good example. So say that again. Why was he baptized?
To fulfill all righteousness in Matthew 3:15.
Okay. What's another potential reason you think he got baptized? Might be a little speculation, but
Could be as an example.
to me that makes a lot of sense. If think of the followers that he had at times, and if he does it, that means something to me. Okay, what's something else? What's another example?
I really think about John 8:1-11, where the woman was caught in adultery and a group of people wanted to stone her and Jesus was there. And when I think about that story, it helps you really have compassion for those who come forward and
Exactly what I was thinking.
and confess their sin, because walking up there and having to let 200 people know the embarrassing things that you have done and the trouble that you have gotten into. And not only that, but the elders who have to stand up and explain in a very careful way, because we have young children in this congregation that are hearing everything. I really admire them having to get up and within a split second and say, okay, this person, X, Y, Z. And the fact that our elders and that hopefully, the members here are not judging this person for backsliding or doing something stupid or whatever it may be. It says a lot, because it provides a safe place for people to just be real. And that's the way that it should be. And so Jesus is saying, all right, guys, go ahead. If you are without sin, go ahead and throw a stone. And it made them stop in their tracks and really look at themselves. And that's what we need to do, is whenever we see somebody going against what maybe we personally think might be a sin, or it is a sin, based on preference or not, we need to make sure we're looking at ourselves first before we judge somebody else or react to somebody else's.
I appreciate your practical example there, because, and don't answer this, but how many times have you been present and someone went forward and you thought, here we go again? If that went through your head, well, you got some examining to do, right? Because this is someone who is doing, like you said, a very difficult thing, admitting what they have done. And all we can think about is something along the lines of, oh, they've done this before, or you're just going to do it again, or I wonder if they're sincere. That's not up to us to decide. None of that is, right? We're to embrace and to love and to forgive as many times as it needs, as many times. Great example. Any others?
Well, I was just about to say, the quote where Jesus said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." I have a lot of forgiveness in my heart, and sometimes these people do not. A lot of people don't even think spiritually in a sense. It's just from the outside looking at being Christian, I like to forgive the other people regardless of what their mindset is, how they choose.
That's a very strong, says a lot about your strength to be able to do that. It's not easy. I mean, like our example that you just said, I mean, Christ was dying. He was being absolutely tortured. And if he could forgive people who didn't understand what they were doing, surely we can too. Any others? Yes, ma'am.
Well, this is my second Bible class ever.
Great.
But I'm slowly just reading through the Luke chapter. But a good example that I can relate to is Luke chapter 8, when verse 19 says, "Then his mother and brothers came to him, but they could not reach him because of the crowd, and he was told, 'Your mother and your brothers are standing outside desiring to see you.' But he answered them, 'My mother and my brothers are those who hear the word of God and do it.'" And that's pretty much what I've been doing. And just following my peace and just being here.
Yeah. No, that's a really good one. And I experienced not personally myself, I guess a little bit, but more so, that situation with my mother's family specifically. We would go visit them, and she was one of 6 children, so 100 cousins at least. And so we're all hanging out, we're all spending time together. Well, Wednesday at 6 would come around, we had to go. That was just, we're going to church. Sunday morning, everybody's coming together, we're going to church. They didn't understand that. You're with family. Why would you leave? Now, you drove 6 hours to Arkansas to come see us, and you're just going to go be with people you don't know. That's difficult, right? I can't imagine how tough that was on my mom to have 3 brothers, 2 sisters, 2 parents all saying, don't do that. But she did, and that was impactful for me. It was impactful for them too, because I think my grandmother was 82 when she was baptized, right? And so the example, it means something. And I don't know about you guys, I like coming here. I mean, I do. We have, yes, all of the things about our spiritual life and our spiritual build up and all those things that we get, that's number one, right? That's the priority. That's what matters. But I like you guys. I like my Christian family. I like hanging out with them. I even like seeing Seth, right? We'll shoot the breeze about PT, how's school going. He tells me something, project he's working on. I say I would never pass school if I had to do it again. These sort of things, conversations go on. Look at and I know we don't do it for the benefits, but just look at the benefits that are being with Christians. I've been traveling, got stuck in a snowstorm, called up somebody that I met one time in Shreveport, and next thing I knew, they were letting me sleep on their couch while it was snowing. Met them one time, right? It's just cool things that happen when you take care of one another. Other examples? Any others?
always like tell when things got very overwhelming or busy, he still took the time to go off and pray.
Yes.
You know, even though he was the Son of God, he, still wanted to make sure that he, took that time. I think that's a good example to us too, because our lives get really busy, and Jesus obviously was doing much more important things than we were, and I think sometimes we forget to stop and take that time.
I think that's really important, and take that time all the time, right? When things are challenging and busy, and look, he was praying the night before he died, right? And so he knew what was coming. I can't imagine how stressful that was. Sweat drops of blood stressful. What about when things are just going great? When things are just going awesome. You ever stop and pray and say thank you? I don't do that near enough. I will be the first to admit. But I mean, you get that promotion, or you pass that test, or whatever the situation is going on, just stop and pray and say thank you. Your kid comes home and says, "Dad, I got a great grade on this or this." Hey, let's pray and thank God for that. Well, I got to do that more now that I say that out loud. Okay. Fun little example. We got Jesus. All right. Name some great leaders, just off the top of your head.
Joshua.
Joshua. And this could be biblical or not. Who else? Moses. Who else?
Churchill.
Okay.
I'd say Martin Luther King.
Okay. Good.
General Grant.
Grant. Any others? I always give people when I write this one down. I'll explain. Any others?
Washington.
Yeah. All right. What makes a great leader? The ability to get people to follow. I didn't say they were great people. Some of them might be. Jesus for sure. Right? But simply the ability to get people to follow. There are great leaders in our world today who don't have this focus at all. So how do we know? Got to be in the Word. We're going to talk about that a little bit more on Wednesday, so I don't want to go into that too far. But I bring that up because how easy is it to get off on a path where you're following a great leader who's not grounded in the truth? Right? Again, great examples, but I think we would all agree. Listen right here. Right? Bad example. Right? Awful, terrible, horrendous things that this man did. But boy, a lot of people followed him. A lot of people thought he was right. A lot of people wanted to do what he did. That's a dramatic example. But what about in the spiritual world today? Really charismatic preachers that you see on TV or that are around town, that for the large majority of them, hearts are in the right place. I mean, they're serving God. Right? They're serving God. There's the same thing with the friends we come in contact with on a day-to-day basis. The large majority of people we come in contact with are good people. Are people who go to church and people who do nice things and people who will, stop and help you change your tire. I mean, just good people. But that's not always enough. There's a difference between good and righteous. Things for us to keep in mind. Let's read this next point B here as we wrap up. It says, we follow Jesus in living by his word. Peter connects the example of Jesus to his role as the shepherd and overseer of your souls. The figurative use of shepherd includes the idea of a teacher. He will feed his flock like a shepherd, Isaiah 40:11. Jesus is not only our perfect example, he's also our perfect instructor. His teaching can no more be separated from his life than his example. We follow him in both. The latter refers to the teaching he left us with in the New Testament. So let me real quick read Matthew 19:28 and then And somebody else, I'll grab Hebrews. Whenever somebody gets to Matthew 19:28, go ahead and read that.
So Jesus said to them, assuredly I say to you that in the regeneration, when the Son of Man sits on the throne of his glory, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel.
You who follow me. Hebrews 2:1-4 says, therefore we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. For since the message declared by angels proved to be reliable, and every transgression or disobedience received a just retribution, how shall we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? It was declared at first by the Lord, and it was attested to us by those who heard, while God also bore witness by signs and wonders and various miracles and by gifts of the Holy Spirit distributed according to his will. So when I think about the point that the author makes here, it's fairly simple. Point one is we follow his example of what he did, how he responded in certain scenarios and situations that we may find ourselves in somewhat similar, correlated circumstances. And then it's, what did he say? What did he say? What did he teach? What does he require of us? Very important that we pay attention to that. If you leave out either one of those, then you're missing the benefit of the entire example that he gives. We'll talk more on Wednesday about the additional example and why it's so important for us to follow him. But I'll wrap up by asking you this question. Who have you always looked up to? Who have you looked up to? For me, well, there's a number of people. My dad, for sure. Why? Well, I remember how hard he worked. I remember the work ethic. I remember working, going through cancer treatments in the morning and working in the afternoon. I remember him buying me a baseball bat that was way more than we could afford on his birthday, right? Selfless, right? I remember those sort of things. Was he perfect? No, certainly not. But great example for me. I also remember a young man when I was, Cooper's age, who was an older teenager who I wanted to be just like him. I wanted to sing like him. He had a good bass voice. I rolled my sleeves up like him. I thought it was cool. I'm sorry to say that he's in jail right now for child pornography. Horrible, terrible thing. But this was a guy I wanted to be just like him. Now, he got tied up in something, in sin. He got tied up in some terrible things, and it just drug him down, and he couldn't pull himself away. And he's paying the price for that. So I know that's a bit dramatic, but I say that to say you got to watch very carefully who your examples are. I look up to a lot of people, especially Stephanie over here. There's a lot of things that you guys do well that I want to emulate, but sorry, you're not perfect either. So I got to make sure that I'm in this word so that I can recognize that when I need to. Do you look up to celebrities? Do you look up to athletes? You look up to successful businessmen, businesswomen. What does Dave Ramsey say? If you want to be rich, do what rich people do. Right? So find good examples. That's all fine. But don't put them up there as the perfect example. Make sure you understand what that is, and one way to do that is to be in the Word.
One thing I want to say, Logan, is that Jesus was connected to the Father the entire time that he was on this earth. He just approached him first in everything, just connected in prayer and all that. And that's how you stay connected to God better, is if he is always in the forefront of your mind. Starting your day with him, saying a prayer on your way to work, and it gets your day started off right, and it makes you stronger, and you're able to make those better decisions and to react better to people. But also, the more that you try to be the example of Jesus, the harder it's going to be. You're going to face a lot of opposition because the devil's not going to want you to do that. He's going to try to distract you. He's going to throw people against you. So don't be surprised when you get a lot of retaliation from the world when you're trying to be stronger as a Christian.
What was it? Who said it? It was somebody who said, well, why does it seem like he's constantly going so hard at us as Christians, Satan that is? It's because he's already got the world, right? He's coming after us. All right, guys, thank y'all for your time. We will finish this lesson up on Wednesday. And then remember all your hard questions next Sunday.
Katie, good comment.
I only talk sometimes.
Oh.
Once in a blue moon.
Hey, how's it going, man? You doing all right?
Yeah, good.
Good.
Vicky, your teacher from years ago, when you.
How are you?
I'm okay, and you? It's good to see
It's
you.
been quite some time.
Yes, it is. How are you doing? Good. Tell me what you're doing.
Oh gosh, everything. Raising two kids.